Welcome to the Midlife Edit, the podcast for women who are navigating the beautiful, messy, and sometimes sweaty journey of midlife. This isn't about a crisis, it's about an awakening. Join me, your host, Jen Weinstein, as I dive into all the things no one warned us about: hot flashes, brain fog, strength training, hormone balancing, and figuring out who the hell we are now. With a mix of expert insights, real talk, and a little humor, because if we're not laughing, we're crying, right? The Midlife Edit is your go-to space for embracing this season with confidence, strength, and balance. Whether you're trying to lift heavier, sleep better, set stronger boundaries, or just remember why you walked into a room, this podcast is here to remind you: midlife is not the end, it's just an edit, and you get to rewrite it your way. Hit subscribe and let's tackle midlife together, one episode at a time. This is the Midlife Edit. Let's make it a damn good chapter. Hello, and welcome back to the Midlife Edit Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Jen Weinstein, and today, this episode may not just be for the midlife women. If you're in your 20s or in your 80s, or if you have a male figure in your life, a husband, a partner, spouse, boyfriend, maybe they could learn a little bit from this episode too and help you out through this phase of life that we're going through. Today we're going back to school and we're going to talk about Perimenopause 101, the roller coaster no one warned you about. But before I get started in this episode, I do want to preface it by saying I am not a doctor, nor am I a medical professional. This episode is all about the research that I've done personally and about the things that I'm going through and the symptoms that I'm having. If you are having really bad symptoms or think you need some medical help, please call your doctor and go with some facts and be your own health advocate. But without further ado, let's talk about perimenopause. We see a lot now on social, at least my algorithm. I see on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook about these women going through perimenopause, and some of it's really funny and I love it, and some of it is pretty informative, but some of it's just plain old BS or just so vague. And we've come a long way, like I've said before, with women's health and the research we've done on perimenopause and menopause, but we still have a long way to go. But really, what is perimenopause? I think we've heard about menopause a lot more than we've heard about perimenopause, except for maybe in the recent last year or two. But we all go through it for a long time. And what's the definition of it? Well, it's the transitional phase before menopause, when your body begins to shift away from its reproductive years due to hormone fluctuations. So it's a natural process because your hormones don't decline in a straight line, right? They fluctuate unpredictably even. And it can feel like a roller coaster for many of us. And hormones, the role of hormones in perimenopause is as everything. And there are three main players in the transition, and that's estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. And like I said, our hormones don't decline in a straight line. Men, completely different. Men's hormones, they are straight, and then they decline gradually. Ours, we're all over the place. So that can lead to so many different symptoms, right? So like I said, the three main players, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, are what makes our symptoms go kind of haywire. So with estrogen, this one fluctuates like crazy. You get some days it's super, super high. Some days it just completely plummets. And this is what leads to your quote unquote classic symptoms like hot flashes and mood swings and brain fog. So like, do you ever have, you're having a good day, everything's going fine, and then all of a sudden you're just pissed. Your mood just changes. You can feel the mood change in your body. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but if you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. Your body just kind of is like, ugh. Well, that's probably your estrogen. And then your progesterone is the one that typically declines first. So that's what leads you to your heavier or irregular periods, your increased PMS symptoms, and maybe some trouble sleeping. And then the testosterone. This is the one that gradually declines. But this can contribute to things like decreased libido, muscle loss, and fatigue. So again, during perimenopause, these hormones rise and fall so unpredictably, creating all of these symptoms. And it's super frustrating, right? Because we don't know what's going on in our bodies. If we don't have doctors who have talked to us about this, um, or, some of the doctors, and unfortunately, a lot of doctors are never trained in perimenopause and menopause. So, or if they are, it's maybe half a chapter in their medical training. So you go in and you tell them these symptoms, and sometimes they look at you and say, well, you just need to eat less or exercise more, or, try to get some sleep. They don't really know what to tell you. But now that there's a lot more research being done and we're realizing why all these things are happening, a lot more doctors, if they don't know, they're willing to listen and willing to dive deeper. So this is, again, me telling you to be your own health advocate and be very firm when you're talking to these doctors about your symptoms. Anyway, let's talk about when it begins, right? Perimenopause. Well, what's that? When's it begin? Well, the typical average onset age of perimenopause is in your late 30s to your mid 40s. However, there's a bunch of different factors that it can happen earlier. I mean, there's women in their early 30s that are starting to go through perimenopause. So it's not the same for everybody. It's not like, oh, okay, you turn 38, you're in perimenopause. It's just not how it happens. This one's fun to talk about and kind of funny and makes you kind of crazy too. But how long does perimenopause last? Well, again, on average, it can last 4 to 10 years before you hit menopause. 4 to 10 years of having these symptoms and the brain fog and the mood swings and the hot flashes. It's crazy, right? But when does it end? So perimenopause officially ends at menopause. But what is menopause? Menopause is the day that you hit 12 consecutive months without a period. It's that one day, that's menopause. So you have perimenopause, which is 4 to 10 years before. You have that one day of menopause, and then everything after that is postmenopause. So when we talk about menopause, it's not really this season of life we're going through. It's that one day. That's that day, the 12th day after, or the last day of your period was 12 months before. So that one day is your menopause. So how does it affect your menstrual cycle, perimenopause? Well, again, estrogen and progesterone are fluctuating. So your menstrual cycle can also become irregular and unpredictable, which is super frustrating as women, right? But you can have longer or shorter cycles. Hopefully you're on the shorter end of that because, 1 month it's 21 days and the next month it's 40 days. And that's cycles, not days of actually bleeding and having your period. But those cycles, you can go longer in between having periods. That's why a lot of women think, oh, I'm in menopause. And then 41 days later, oh, just kidding, I'm still in perimenopause. And it can skip. Your period can skip for you for a few months, and then all of a sudden, it's like the floodgates opened, and you have a really heavy period. And heavier periods are typical in perimenopause, but some people get lighter periods too. The one thing that really sucks too is your PMS symptoms are usually worsen. So you're going to get cramps more often, or just the uncomfortability or the mood swings. And they happen because ovulation becomes less consistent. And without regular ovulation, your progesterone drops first. And it's why so many symptoms show up before your period even stops completely. So again, the difference between perimenopause and menopause. Perimenopause is the transition phase before menopause. And menopause is officially reached when you've gone 12 months without a period. In perimenopause, your hormone levels fluctuate out of control wildly. There's no rhyme or reason. It's just they fluctuate. In menopause or postmenopause, your estrogen stabilizes at a lower level. So we lose estrogen, right? And in perimenopause, your symptoms come and go unpredictably. So you could be walking down the street and have a hot flash, or you could walk into a room and forget what you went in there for. That's that brain fog part, right? And I know we've all done that. In perimenopause, though, you can still get pregnant. Fertility is declining. Your eggs from the day you're born start to decline, right? But you can still get pregnant in perimenopause. In menopause, you're no longer ovulating, so there's no chance of getting pregnant. So what triggers early or late menopause? Well, genetics. So if your mom experienced early perimenopause, you may too. And, again, we haven't had the research that we have now. So she may not have realized what she was going through, but maybe have a conversation with her and be like, hey, when did you start getting hot flashes or brain fog or whatever, the mood swings? Lifestyle factors like chronic stress, poor diet, lack of exercise, and smoking can speed up your hormone changes. So all those things can affect your hormones and can put you into perimenopause earlier. Medical conditions and or surgeries. So for me, I had a hysterectomy at 38. It was almost instantly that I knew I was in perimenopause. That's when I started doing the research on perimenopause too, because I didn't realize maybe exactly what I was going through. My doctor was really good about giving me the hysterectomy because of all the symptoms that I had up to it. But unfortunately, post hysterectomy, there was nothing. There was no real follow-up on what I may experience or what happens next. And that's really frustrating because your body goes through this huge change and then you're kind of left out on an island. So again, I had to start doing my own research and figuring out what was going on. And, as time moved on, it got worse. My hot flashes were crazy. My brain fog is absolutely there. I get weird symptoms too, like itchy ears. It's the strangest thing, but your ears just they itch from the inside and it just doesn't stop sometimes, and it's so frustrating. And the trouble sleeping, I think I've kind of had it all. And another thing, chemotherapy or radiation can cause ovaries to stop functioning earlier. So uh, if you've unfortunately had cancer and you went through these things at an earlier age, maybe late 20s, early 30s, you can go into perimenopause probably a little bit sooner. Um, but again, perimenopause is not the same for every woman. And that's why I think the research is so sporadic and not all there, because every woman, it's different for every single woman. You could talk to somebody who maybe never had symptoms, or somebody who literally thought they were crazy and had gone through so many different things because they didn't realize it was perimenopause. And their doctor said, again, no, here's some SSRTs, you're depressed, take these, or lose weight and you'll feel better, things like that, when we're really not getting to the root of the problem. Your genetics, your lifestyle, your diet, stress levels, overall health, they all play a role in how perimenopause unfolds for you. So again, I had endometriosis and I had a lot of other issues. And so I had finally had a hysterectomy at 38 after I went through years and years of doctors telling me I was too young and, crazy things like that. But my symptoms started pretty instantly after that. But the hot flashes for me started probably about a year ago, and it gets so bad at times where my husband would wake up because he could feel he could feel it, and it's terrible. It's not a good feeling at all. You get so hot from the inside and you don't know how to fix it. But I was my own health advocate, and I went and got a hormone panel done by my doctor, which is something that's crazy that we don't get just with our normal blood work. They don't check all of your hormones, a full hormone panel. And not surprisingly, my estrogen was really low. So I started some hormone replacement therapy. I take a pill of estradiol every day, same time every day. And it is really, really, really helped my symptoms. They haven't gone away completely, but it's really, really helped my symptoms. Um, so it's kind of crazy how just one little thing like that, and they don't test for it, and you don't realize that maybe this is what's going on with my body. So my advice to you would be push for a hormone panel. Next time you go to the doctor, just be like, I want a full hormone panel. My insurance covered it. It wasn't anything crazy. It's just something that they don't do. And the funniest part about this is it wasn't even my gynecologist that has helped me. My PCP has been the most amazing healer, I guess, in all of this. She has listened to every single symptom. She's sat down with me for as long as I needed. And I'm finally found a doctor who really listens. So, if your doctor doesn't, find another one. There are plenty out there, and you just have to be your own health advocate. So moving on, let's go over some myths. How about 8 myths about perimenopause? Because it's funny that, these male doctors just think that they know everything about what's going on when they haven't actually had the training or the research. So let's go over some myths, right? Myth number 1, perimenopause only happens in your 50s. Well, we already talked about that. It can start as early as your late 20s or early 40s, right? Or, I'm sorry, your late 30s or your early 40s. And the average age for menopause is usually 51, but you figure before that, you've got a good 4 to 10 years before that of perimenopause. And some women notice changes in their late 30s with their irregular cycles and their mood swings and the brain fog, and you don't realize it's perimenopause. So perimenopause happens way before your 50s. Myth number 2, if you're still getting a period, you're not in perimenopause. And that's wrong. Fact, your period can be regular or irregular and you can still be in perimenopause. So some women experience predictable cycles but worsening symptoms. So your period's on the same schedule every time, but all of a sudden you have crazy weird anxiety or sleep issues or crazy cramps. And you can get that for years before your period stops. Or hormone fluctuations can cause symptoms before your cycle changes. I never had a regular cycle ever in my life. I never knew when I was getting my period. So this one for me wasn't something that I tracked. It was really hard to track my periods, and they would be really, really bad, which ultimately led to my hysterectomy at 38. But if you're regular all the time, you can still be in perimenopause. And all of a sudden, your period changes where it's heavier or you feel worse or things like that. That might be a sign that you're in perimenopause. Myth number 3, perimenopause symptoms are the same for everyone. We already talked about that. Some symptoms vary wildly, crazy wildly from woman to woman. Some women experience really severe symptoms: hot flashes, insomnia, mood swings, anxiety. My anxiety has gone crazy. And another thing that I have come to realize, and my doctor have come to realize, and I've been diagnosed with ADHD. I'm 41. I never knew that my entire life, but it makes so much sense now, right? But other people have symptoms, other women have symptoms that are so mild that they hardly even notice a change. So again, your genetics, lifestyle, diet, stress levels, they all influence your experience. And, I don't want to get too much into the diet part on this episode, but your symptoms can change from maybe what your mom's symptoms were too, because maybe back when your mom was going through perimenopause, we didn't have as many chemicals in our foods and things like that, where it makes your hormones go crazy because we're eating all this artificial junk, right? So you may not necessarily follow the path that your mom did in perimenopause and menopause. All right, moving on. Myth number 4, hot flashes are the first signs of perimenopause. That is wrong. The fact is that many women experience sleep issues or irregular periods or mood changes first. Hot flashes and night sweats are common, but they're not always the first sign. Anxiety, brain fog, fatigue, those are ones who show up before hot flashes do typically. Myth number 5, you can't get pregnant during perimenopause. Fact, you can still get pregnant until you've officially hit menopause. If you're ovulating, you can get pregnant, right? Ovulation becomes irregular, but it doesn't stop completely. So if you don't want to get pregnant and you think you're in perimenopause, just make sure that you're careful. Myth number 6, perimenopause only affects your reproductive system. That's false. Fact, it impacts your entire body, including brain function, metabolism, muscles, and bones. I've talked about this and I'm not going to stop talking about it until the day I die. Strength training is so, so, so important as we go into our later years because we lose muscle mass and we lose our bones are not as strong, right? So strength training is so, so, so important. But strength training also helps brain function and metabolism. So we'll talk about that in later episodes too. But brain fog, anxiety, depression, they all happen due to estrogen's roles in your neurotransmitter regulation. Weight gain and muscle loss occur due to metabolic and muscle mass shifts, and your joint pain, heart health changes, gut health issues are all common side effects. Also, your cholesterol as we get older, even if we're eating the same thing all the time, our cholesterol increases as women, and it's crazy. Our bodies just fight against us, I guess. Myth number 7, there's nothing you can do about perimenopause. That's false, right? The fact is, lifestyle changes in itself can make a huge difference in how you feel. Strength training can support metabolism and bone health, and it can just make you feel better and mentally. I strength train for all of that plus my mental health. I mean, I love getting up and knowing that I did something, but it helps me. It makes me happier. A protein-rich diet helps muscle maintenance and can stabilize that blood sugar. Managing stress, which it's so frustrating because, I can sit here and tell you, oh, yeah, you have to manage stress because it reduces your cortisol spikes, and cortisol spikes worsen your symptoms. It's really hard to manage stress. I understand that. Life is stressful. Being a woman is stressful. Being a mom or a daughter or a sister or a wife or an employee, everything is just, life is stressful, right? So we need to try to manage it as best we can. And then supplements and HRT, hormone replacement therapy, if needed, can provide relief for many of us. Myth number 8, the final one that I have, is perimenopause equals the end of youth. Holy shit, is this false? It's a transition, guys. It's not the end. This is just the beginning. It's just a transition to a different way of life, a different type of life. But while your hormone shifts are happening, you're thriving, and women in midlife can thrive more than ever. You are finding yourself. You are figuring out who you are. You are learning that you like certain things or you don't like certain things. You're learning to stand up for yourself. And then with the right nutrition and exercise and mindset, you can feel strong and confident and empowered in this phase. And I love that we're talking about this now because we are so strong as women, and the older we get, we can continue that strength. Remember, midlife isn't a crisis. It's just a new beginning, right? And I have done so much research on this topic because I was sick of feeling the way I did. And I didn't want to be one of those women who just said, oh, this is just life and I'm just going to get older and then I die. And that's just not, it's not what I'm about. That's not who I am. And I don't want to do that. And hopefully you don't either. And that's why you're listening to this podcast. So that's just, a quick overview on what perimenopause is. I'm going to talk about it more and more and more throughout this podcast. And, we can talk about it together. Tell me about your symptoms in perimenopause. It's funny because we can talk about these things now together and it's not so taboo and it's not so hush hush. So drop me a comment. Tell me about what you're going through. And we're going to talk a lot more about hormones. Actually, my guest next week is a hormone health expert. She is awesome at talking about perimenopause and even postpartum and pre-pregnancy, all of that kind of stuff. She is the CEO of her own company about hormone health, and I'm really excited to have her on. So stay tuned next week for her interview. And then just a few quick things. I just, again, want to thank you for all of the awesome positive feedback that I've gotten from all of you during this podcast. I'm really excited to do this. I think it's really, really good that we talk about all the things that we're going through as women in midlife and talk about the fun things that are going to happen instead of calling it a crisis. If you want to be a guest on the podcast, shoot me an email. I would love to have you on. We can talk about all things midlife. And if you love the podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review. That would mean so much to me. And then last thing before I end, I have on my website, thejenweinstein.com, we have merch available now for the Midlife Edit. Not only podcast merch, but I started my own little club called the Midlife Gains Club. So there's some merch on there for that. So go check that out. But, I'm really excited that you're all here and I want to continue this in such a positive way. And I just thank you all so much for being so supportive. And honestly, women, if you are out there and you're like, my husband doesn't understand what I'm going through, send him this podcast. Maybe it's a little eye-opening to the things that you're going through right now in perimenopause. But keep on keeping on. Go talk to your doctor, get that hormone panel done, and just realize that you're not alone in all of this. And let's start a community of women who are going through things together that we can chat with. So, until next time, this is the Midlife Edit. Let's make it a damn good chapter.